Hi class, welcome to lesson number 16. Again, as I said before, we're continuing our microeconomics class, and soon, bear with me here, we'll move on to macroeconomics. Macroeconomics, that being said, is very important. Last class we went over the importance of a firm, right? What is a basic firm? We said what's the difference between accounting profit and economic profit, and then we went over to short run and long run differences. As you can see before, this is the answer to the last homework question. We said the question was, what is opportunity cost? Technical definition is as follows. It's the cost of foregoing or giving up an opportunity in place of something else. And what does that mean intuitively? It basically says that, hey, so I'm right now watching this video, right? I could be going out and maybe working right now, making money, right? So the opportunity cost in that case would be if you went out and made money and you made $10 an hour, and this video was for an hour, in that case, the opportunity cost would be $10, right? Because you're giving up and you're foregoing that opportunity in place of something else, which is watching this video, okay? Opportunity cost is referred quite often in other examples, so I advise all of you to understand what this really means, okay? So that being said, continuing this whole summary of short run and long run, we ended the last class with that kind of concept. To really hammer out the details behind short run and long run, I just want to put down a real quick chart for you guys to see, what's the difference between short run and long run, okay? So with that being said, I'm going to try to use this side of the board to write down the table showing short run and long run differences, all right? All right, so in terms of short run and long run, there's a couple of big differences that this table will hopefully try to show you guys. Okay, the first part is the capital. Okay, and this could be, typically speaking, when you have a microeconomics problem, typically speaking, they're talking about your plant or your factory. Okay, so the capital, we talked about this in the short run, is fixed. Okay. And I'm sure you remember in the long run from last class, we said that all inputs are variable, which means that this is going to be variable. Okay, pretty straightforward in that sense, right? But the big one to remember is that in the short run, capital is fixed. Okay, that's the main one. All right, so let's talk about your fixed costs. Okay, fixed costs in the long run. In the short run, there are some, right? We discussed the capital being as fixed. It could be other inputs being fixed. It just doesn't really matter which one. Generally speaking, it is capital. But the point is, in short run, we have at least one fixed, and then the rest of them are variable. You could have more fixed inputs. If that's a multiple question saying there's going to be only one fixed, it's not true. There can be other fixed inputs. The point of the matter is we have some fixed, we have some variable in short run. In the long run, it's all variable, okay? So this is variable as well, right? Kind of the same point, but sort of used to hammer out the details. The other part the big part is, okay, so the next part is variable costs. It says that, well, in variable costs, there are some variable costs in short run. In the long run, everything is variable, I've said before. The big one is the entry to and exit of firms, okay? And this is a pretty big concept we'll talk about later on in class, but, the point is that when in a market, right, take any market, we can take the food market, specifically we can say the pizza market, right? If there's profit in that market, generally speaking, people want to get into that market. Why? Because people like to make money. Firms like to make profit, okay? We've discussed this before, right? The goal of a firm is to make profit. So if a market, like the pizza market, says, okay, there's some money left in it to make money, people are going to jump in the long run, right? So the entry and exit in the firm in the short run happens a lot, right? But we really can't chart up and graph it. It's really difficult to show you guys. But in the long run, we can show you what the big differences are. So typically speaking, in an entry and exit, right? Entry and exit, and don't worry if you don't understand this right off the bat, because we'll discuss this in detail later on, right? Entry and exit of firms, okay, this is of firms, right? In the short run, SR, right? Typically, no, right? We are not going to show you the entry and exit, right? It's too difficult, right? In the long run, we do. We do show you the differences in entry and exit of firms, okay? Because the bigger differences we can easily show you, and it's measurable. In the short run, it's too many changes. Entry and exit typically is not going to happen on your models, okay? So, short run and long run, there's a couple differences. We said variable cost, fixed cost, variable cost, long run, it's always variable. Inputs are all variable. Short run, there's some fixed, some variable. Entry and exit of firms, in the short run we said there is no exit and entry. The long run we said yes, there are firms coming in and out of that market, okay? That being said, let's move on to the how do you measure production in a firm, right? So what do we mean by production? Okay, so say you're making a particular product, okay? You're making, let's stick to pizza, right? You are Pizza Hut and your job is to make pizza, okay? So typically speaking, how can we make sure that we are able to measure the kind of production, the kind of pizza they're making, how much pizza they're making, what's kind of the output of pizza? Are they, remember that marginal analysis we talked about before? So what's the marginal analysis behind the making of pizza at Pizza Hut? So for all these, we use certain terms. So with that being said, I'm going to start writing down the, this comes under the title of short run production measures. Short run as in SR production measures, okay? Production measures. And there are three fancy terms. Not really fancy, but fancy probably at first, and then you're like, okay, it's pretty simple, okay? But the first one is total product of labor, okay? Total product of labor, okay? Generally speaking, when you see the total product of labor, people typically write this down as T, P, and the L here, okay? That stands for labor, okay? So total product of labor, that's generally a TPL is how they write down. And as I said before in class, in economics, we always have an abbreviation for everything. Are we lazy? Maybe, but it just makes easier sense, okay? So TPL is the total quantity or total output of a good, okay? So pretty straightforward is the total output of a good, I believe at each, let me make sure I'm getting this right, at each quantity of labor employed, right? At each quantity of labor employed. Okay, so what does this really mean? It says that, so TPL is pretty straightforward, right? So if you're a Pizza Hut, right, and we are talking about the short run, right? Short run, let's say, is defined as this week, okay? We're saying in this week, right, the total product of labor would be how much of pizza are you making for your 5 workers at your restaurant, right? The reason why we say is at each quantity of labor is between the 5 guys in making pizza or 10 people making pizza, there's a huge difference, right? Because the more number of people, generally speaking, obviously, we'll show you more analysis of this, but generally speaking, you create more product, okay? That's generally how it works. So that's why when you define TPL, or total product of labor, we're making sure that we say that, okay, yeah, it is the total amount of output you're getting, okay, in the short run, but more importantly, what they're saying is at each quantity of labor, okay? So we cannot change it, because if we go from 1 worker to 2 workers, your TPL is going to change, okay? So make sure you understand that, okay? And later on, I'll try to show you a chart to give you more examples. Okay, so walking over here, I'll try to tell you guys 2 other things. We have marginal product of labor, okay, MPL, and then APL, which is average product of labor. Okay, so I'll go ahead and erase this definition of average, guys. Our favorite term, marginal, right? So let's talk about marginal product of labor, also known as MPL, okay? So that's an ugly looking M, that's okay. Marginal product of labor. Okay. And this is generally known as MPL. Again, M stands for marginal, P is product, L is labor, okay? So MPL is defined as the following, as the change in total product resulting from a change in the labor input. All right, so we're moving on to the marginal product of labor. And I'm going to use this side of the board to explain to you what MPL, or marginal product of labor, is, okay? So marginal product of labor. All right, what is this giant term? Okay, well, first of all, before I explain to you what the term is, I told you guys we have abbreviations for everything. This one is obviously pretty intuitive. MPL, right? Marginal product of labor. M, P, and L over here, just like that. Okay, and the marginal product of labor is defined as the change in total product. Okay, the change in total product. Let's go ahead and write that down. Change in total product. All right. Total product resulting from a change in the labor input. Okay, what do we mean by this? Resulting from a change in the labor input. Okay. And maybe before I explain to you guys, I'm writing down a formula as well. Okay, so change in total product resulting from a change in the labor input. That is written by the following. Okay, it says that MPL is equal to the change. This is delta, right? We've used that sign before. You've seen that in previous classes of total product of labor, right? TPL, right? TPL over a change in the labor input. So over a change, which is delta, in the labor input by L, okay? So MPL, marginal product of labor, is saying, okay, so if there's a change in the total product of labor and there's a change in the labor input, right? You divide those two and that's MPL. Now, intuitively speaking, right, we've talked about marginal analysis before. We said, okay, what happens to something if we add one extra unit, right? So in this case, we're saying, okay, marginal product of labor. So we're saying, if we increase one extra person, right, or one extra worker, right, what's going to happen to my product? How much more product am I going to, make, right? So if my total product was 0, right, and my total product went to 1, right, and here I had 0 workers and here I had 1 worker, my difference in total product, right, would be 1, correct? That's 1. And then my difference in the labor would be 1, right? So my MPL would be 1, okay? So basically marginal product of labor is asking you the question, if I add 1 extra worker, right, what's going to happen to my total product? How much of it is it going to increase, okay? So that is a basic question, and MPL tries to answer that. And remember, if it's just 1 extra worker, okay, this is going to be just 1, right? Your MPL is just going to equal the change in TPL, okay? So remember that if this is just 1, obviously it's going to be, MPL is going to be equal to the change in total product of labor. All right, so we've defined the total product of labor. We've defined the marginal product of labor. Third last one is average product of labor. All right, so I'm going to let that soak in your minds, and for those of you still trying to copy, I'll use this side of the board now to define average product of labor, okay? All right, so what is average product of labor? Average product of labor is also very intuitive to a certain degree, but we'll define it anyways, okay? So, all right, what is APL? APL stands for average, okay? AVG is going to be average, all right, guys? I'm lazy now, right? But this stands for average, okay? Average of product of labor. Average product of labor. Why am I saying of? Average product of labor. Okay, so APL stands for average product of labor. How do I define average product of labor? Average product of labor is defined as the following. It's a measure and is a total product divided by the amount of labor employed. Okay, so what is the total product? We said the total product is TPL, right? And that is divided by the total amount of labor, okay? So that's just L. So APL, okay, is equal to TPL over L. You know, marginal analysis and average analysis typically are used just to understand, well, how is my labor being affected? How is my labor affecting productivity, okay? So APL, instead of a fancy definition, basically says that if I take my total product, okay, and I divide it by the labor, on average, okay, what is the product being produced, okay? So this is average analysis, that's marginal analysis, all right? Understanding both is very important, okay? With that being said, I'm going to kind of explain to you guys a little better of these terms, write a chart with numbers so we can kind of say, okay, mathematically, what this really means to us, okay? So this is pretty straightforward. APL equals TPL over L. That definition, hopefully by now you got it. With that being said, I'm going to erase it and draw a chart with numbers so that you understand APL, MPL, TPL, okay? And then we add 3 other terms, but before that, let's hop into a chart. Okay. All right. Chart says the following. It says first one is units of labor. Let me divide this here, right? First one is units of labor, right? How many people am I employing? Do I have 1 worker? Do I have 2? Do I have 3 in my factory or whatever it is, right? So units of labor. All right. Next topic. Kind of feel like I'm playing Jeopardy right now. Okay. Next topic is total product of labor, right? Total product of labor. All right, that's the second one. Okay, third one you can probably guess is MPL, and fourth one is going to be APL. And I apologize because these are becoming shorter and shorter, but I'll make sure the numbers are clear. Okay. All right, so first one is going to be pretty simple. We're going to say, okay, we'll have 0 people, okay? In our restaurant, rather, we said pizza. Okay, let's choose pizza as our victim, as our example today, so that everyone's kind of thinking about pizza, right? But all eyes here, okay? But anyways, so for the total product would be 0, okay? Because obviously you have 0 people, you know, you're producing 0 products. We're assuming that, you know, the machines or whatever in the restaurant are not, they need some labor input into it. MPL and APL are not applicable because we're not moving from a particular point to you know, 0. It's kind of saying you can't analyze that, okay? So at point 0 you really can't analyze it, but at 1 unit of labor the fun stuff begins, okay? So for 1 unit of labor, say we're producing 5 slices of pizza or 5 boxes of pizza, which is more realistic, okay? So MPL, right, which is your change in TPL, over there you can see that, right, over the change in labor, right? So what is the change in TPL? Well, my TPL went from 0 to 5. Okay, I got that. So it's 5. And what's my change in labor? My labor changed by 1, okay? So 5 over 1 is 5, all right? So my MPL is 5. Okay. My APL, my average analysis, says, what's my average analysis? It says, well, let me take the total product of labor, which is 5, and divide it by the labor, which is 1. Also gives me 5. Okay? Now, let's see the second one, right? For 2 people in my restaurant, I produce, in this example, 15 boxes of pizza. Yay. All right. So we go from 5 to 15. All right. So MPL questions, what is happening to my total product of labor? What's the change in that? What's the change in my labor? Now, in this example that I'm using, guys, my units in labor is always going to go up by 1. What does that mean? Well, remember when I told you guys over here, I gave you an example. I said, well, MPL is equal to a change in TPL or the change in labor. And I said, well, if change in labor is only 1 unit, then your MPL is just going to equal the change in TPL, right? So when I do these numbers, I'm not going to divide by the change in labor because the change in labor is always 1 in my example, okay? I just wanted to let you guys know so it's pretty clear in that aspect. All right, so we're going from 5 to 15. The change there is 15 minus 5, which is 10, okay? So my MPL is going to be 10, okay? And then my APL is, what's my TPL, which is 15. I'm going to divide that by the units of labor, which is 2. 15 over 2 is 7.5, okay? And I'll show you guys one more number so that it's clear. Hopefully by now we're making the difference. Again, 15 to 5, that's a change of 10. We're added 10, and that's why this one is 10. This one, 0 to 5, we've added 5. That's why MPL is 5. Here, 5, we've taken TPL divided by units of labor, and we've gotten 5. Here, we've divided 15 by 2. We've gotten 7.5, okay? So TPL over L is average product of labor. All right, for the third person in my restaurant, right, we are making 30 boxes of pizza, okay? And this is a addition of 15, right? 30 minus 15 is 15. Obviously, we've added 15 to it. Again, I've divided by 1, so my MPL is going to be 15. Now, my TPL is going to be my APL, excuse me, is going to be my TPL over units of labor. 30 over 3 is 10, all right? So at this point, I hope everyone understands a little more clearly how we compute MPL and APL. TPL typically is given, labor is typically given, okay? So understanding that, hopefully all of you are able to compute. As usual, I always recommend all of you to do problems so you understand it, in a more sound basis, okay? So that being said, let's move on to the next exciting stuff that we have here today for you guys. We have the law of diminishing marginal returns. All right, so law of marginal, okay, diminishing marginal returns, a lot of words there. But because we talked about the law of, what did we talk about before? We said something was diminishing, right? We said that, what did we say? We said that, I believe, when we talk about your demand as a consumer, we said that as a consumer is always diminishing, right, in terms of their utility, okay? We said that before, and I'll recap that concept and this concept and then try to tell the difference, okay? So the law of diminishing marginal utility was something we discussed before. I don't know, I hope you guys remember this, but when we graphed, marginal utility, that's MU, right? We said that it kind of goes downhill, right? Why? When you have that, let's use this pizza example. When you say, hey, today, I really want to go have pizza, man. I really love pizza, right? Go have that first slice of pizza. It's amazing. You've hit heaven. It's awesome. It's, you have a lot of utility or satisfaction, right? Second slice of pizza, pretty good. But generally speaking, it's not as satisfactory, or it doesn't give you as much utility, as we like to say in economics, as the first slice, right? So as we add more slices of pizza, we've said your marginal utility decreases, and that was the law of diminishing marginal utility. Well, today we're going to talk about the law of diminishing marginal returns, okay? Similar concept, but in a different perspective, right? So let me go ahead and define it first, and then we'll talk about it in detail, right? So we'll say law of diminishing marginal. There's that word again that we love, marginal, right? Returns. Okay, so law of diminishing marginal returns, what is it? It states that as successive units of a variable resource, okay, let's write it down, as successive units of variable resource or added to a fixed resource, added to a fixed resource, right? Oh my gosh, I'm not able to write today. All right. resource. Beyond some point, the marginal product falls. Okay. Beyond some point, your marginal product, which is MPL, right? Remember that? MPL falls. All right? All right, so why does this happen? And, we'll try to graph it out to show you guys, graphically how that looks. But, I think it's more important to discuss why does this happen. All right, so think about that restaurant we talked about. We said, okay, well, in this pizza restaurant, we had, 0, 1, 2, 3 workers. So I had, I just started off my restaurant. I added first worker. Things were going well. I was making, here in this example, 5 boxes, right? And then later I made 15 with the second worker, 30 with the third worker, so on and so forth. But what happens is, imagine, right? I have this restaurant. It's obviously not going to increase exponentially. We said in the short run, that's going to be fixed, right? My restaurant size is fixed. So in the kitchen, right, I have, 3 people. Things are going well. One guy's making the dough. One guy's adding the ingredients. The other person's putting in the oven. The fourth person maybe is cutting faster, whatnot. With the 5th and 6th person, what really happens in this restaurant is that things get crowded, right? And more people in a kitchen, you've probably seen this happen, right? When a lot of, family get-togethers, a lot of people in the kitchen, disaster really occurs, right? People are making things fall, whatnot. So what really, in economics, what we say is, as we add more workers, right, we do increase MPL. But after some point, what happens is this marginal product of labor, right, which is the amount of product you're adding for every labor extra worker that you have in, right? At some point, it's going to decrease because, that space we're talking about, right? We said that in that kitchen, it's going to be the 6 or 7, it's going to be cramped. People are going to make mistakes. We're going to hit each other, whatnot. But really, to any example, it really applies because, beyond some point, it's not as efficient. People are not as efficient, right, as having maybe 5 people in that restaurant or, 4 people in that restaurant. I really don't know in that example, but the point is that beyond some point, right, your MPL, or marginal product of labor, is going to decrease. And it's extremely important to understand this, okay? So the law of diminishing marginal returns says that beyond some point, after I've added X amount of workers in my restaurant, building, factory, whatever it is, at some point my MPL is going to start to decrease, okay? So understand, differentiate law of diminishing utility, right? We talked about that, marginal utility, versus the law of diminishing marginal returns, okay? They're 2 different laws and they're applied in 2 different circumstances. So understand the differences. With that being said, let me quickly recap what we went over. We put in a chart first. We said short and long run. We said in short run, at least one input is fixed, right? We said that others can be variable. In the long run, however, all inputs are variable, okay? So we said that's short run and long run. Then we talked about TPL, we talked about MPL and APL. TPL is total product of labor, how much output you produce. MPL, right, this term right here is said, well, for every single worker we add, or how many ever workers you add, how much of total product is going up, right? That's MPL analysis. APL is average analysis. It takes the total product, you divide by the labor you have, and that's your average product of labor. Again, average analysis and marginal analysis are always used to compare how you're doing as a business or whatever it is. Economics, we like to look at 2 perspectives, average analysis and marginal analysis. Okay? With that being said, the last one we talked about was the law of diminishing marginal returns, and we just went over this. So with that being said, what is the homework question for you guys? Well, the homework question I have for you guys is that if I had to define 3 terms, right, TPL, APL, and MPL, I am going to ask you guys to either define it or write the formulas down for MPL and TPL and APL, okay? So APL, I know there's a formula, right? So why don't we give you I'll ask you guys the formula for APL, define me TPL, define me MPL. So define me total product of labor, define me marginal product of labor, write me the formula for average product of labor. With the answer, I'll be back in the next lesson. Hope to see you guys there. Thank you so much.